Yo, I'm back from my extended stay in Shyish, the Realm of Death, and ready for another AoScast, so let's plow ahead. Starting off with some Patreon questions. Good Painter Stormcast Man is curious as to an Archon the Black rundown. 20-point hike makes him not worth it, he doesn't buy it. He thinks Archon's one of the best casters in the game for his value, just fragile. He has access to fantastic spells as well in Legions and Nagash and would like me to talk about it. Well, I mean, technically you're right. A 20-point hike, really either way, wasn't gonna make or break Archon the Black. And on the face of it, he's good. 16-inch flying is crazy fast. He has the two things required to be considered a good spellcaster in Age of Sigmar. 2 spells a turn, and bonuses to cast and unbind, and his bonuses are ample. He's got +3 to cast in Sacrament, and +2 to unbind. Very good. This isn't some Tree Lord Ancient who, despite being a 300-point wizard monster general, has no bonuses to cast and only 1 spell a turn, even in Gnarlroot. How did that not get addressed in Sylvaneth 2.0? They were right there making the book again. Anyway. Archon knows all death spells in a radius around him, and this gives him the critical ability to, Joseph Biden up behind a necromancer, put his hands uncomfortably on their shoulders, and whisper, "Can I have this dance? Can I cast this dance?" Having someone else reliably cast Dance Macabre is an underrated component of playing LON. That spell on your summonable units is so strong. Even though Archon's spell was nerfed to be just about worthless against anyone with mortal wound protection, it is still decent if the target unit has none. And your lore spells are of course excellent. Though I think Archon's cost is maybe high, both now and before, it's still in the ballpark of being worth it, considering everything we just went over. The low 300s is about right for a strong double-caster wizard monster who's good at unbinding, but has some downsides, like fragile and unique named heroes who can't wear artifacts or use command traits. And those 2 downsides are pretty significant, even just in a vacuum. Still, he isn't some stupendously overpriced Eidolon of the Sea, or dogshit war scroll Aventus Firestrike. Archon's a solid scroll with a solid cost. His command ability is honestly meh. Make no mistake, it would be amazing in one of those armies with infinite command points, like Gloomspite, but Legion of Nagash is a barren wasteland of extra command points, and you can get his CA from a command trait if you really want it, and no one does. So in a vacuum, pretty good, but placed into the soup of Legions of Nagash, and specifically Legion of Sacrament, he becomes just not worth it for me. And it's not because he went up 20, that really didn't hurt that much. And it's not because Necromancers also went up 20 each and you tended to play 2 with Archons, so now your list is up 60, although that sucked. And it's not because you can only buy 1 extra command point now instead of a bunch, so using his CA really is no longer a real option most of the time, although that also sucked. What kills it for me is one thing and one thing only. So in all the Legions of, if you would take a Mortarch, it has to be the Mortarch for that Legion, and it has to be your general. And this ruins everything for me, unless you're also buying some other Mortarch and some other one, which is even more ridiculous, because they're all kind of bad. Yes, even Neferata, now that you can only buy 1 extra command point. So much of the strength of your faction is contingent upon your general not being dead, that making the easiest one to kill your general is probably a mistake just on first principles. This is exacerbated by the metagame right now, which is really pushing people towards being able to kill opponent monsters immediately. You have to kill that Grizzagore general. You have to kill, well, every single Slaanesh hero early and at the same time, or you'll lose the game. What exactly is the 11 wound 4-up save Archon going to do against people prepared to do that? Well, get killed. Get killed really easily. Or be so far away that he kind of played himself and he can't affect the game very well. You could say Lord of Change is fragile too, and it's one of his known downsides, but at least he can hold an artifact and cheat at dice. Archon even flies, so he can't LOS through Wildwoods to avoid those Bo Kurnoth Death Stars people are talking about online, that I don't think are very good, but maybe I'm wrong. Point is, the meta is accidentally really hostile to him as general right now, and he is not good enough to warrant fighting against the wind. He's a good 300-point wizard, perhaps even a great 300-point wizard, but when your allegiance abilities fall apart when your general dies, it's just not worth it. And secondly, Legion command traits are very strong, and it's a true sacrifice to give them up for a unique leader. Look at Aura of Dark Majesty for -1 to hit in combat, or Lord of Nagashazar for +1 attacks on all weapons Aura. Mastery of Death, aka Skelectric Slide for 3-inch hero phase move aura that a slow army that needs the speed would really like. Even Unholy Impetus and Sanguine Blur are great. These are huge free bonuses you're giving up to run Archon as the general. And we haven't even talked about his competition, the near-perfect Velocida. If Archon is like the most fragile general you can choose, Velocida is like the most durable general you can use. Unless your opponent is exclusively throwing mortal wounds at you, Velocida with Ethereal is more durable than Nagash, for half the cost. And not playing one as a general really puts you at a disadvantage. Man, if only there was some way to play Archon in a Legions of Nagash army, but still have Velocida general with a command trait. In other words, if only there was a way to kill the cake and resurrect it too. Ah, but there is, Grand Host of Nagash. I don't know if this is what Good Painter Stormcast Man was talking about exactly, but it works. In Grand Host of Nagash, you can play a Mortarch just fine, and it doesn't have to be the general. The only general requirement in Grand Host is Nagash, if you're playing him. And going Grand Host isn't even that bad, because Lord of Nagashazar is really fucking good, and Graveguard or Battleline. I think Archon as not the general in a Grand Host army when you're playing a fully loaded Velocida general and want to make use of some Graveguard Battleline really has legs. So now in a Grand Host, his fragility is only a normal downside for a unit, instead of potentially ruinous for everything, right? And you still get his strong caster benefits. He can cast Dance for you, he can lock down spellcasting pretty well, almost as good as Nagash. I think he's a solid choice in a Grand Host list. Especially because you're generally not going to play a battalion unless you're on Death March, and so you only have one artifact choice. And it kind of makes Archon's inability to hold one a little easier to swallow, because you only get one. You know, instead of Archon, this list might be running a second Velocida instead, but without an artifact, they're considerably worse. And so some people would take Vordry, but he's got his own problems and he's very expensive. There's a lot of pluses and minuses here. I think Good Painter Stormcast Man is onto something if he was indeed talking about Grand Host. If he was talking about Sacrament, then no. But as a strong unit you don't mind losing, I like him in Grand Host. Alright, more Patreon questions. Dwight Crow. I was inspired by your thoughts on Stormcast Battleline. Could you do the same type of rundown for the other half of the Soul Wars box, the Nighthaunt? I realize that most of the units are better in Legions of Grief / Nagash, but I wanted to do something with the Nighthaunt. Which battle line should I start with? Good question, though I think Nighthaunt has more legs than people give it credit for, so I just want to point that out here. If you want a hot take, I think right now, tuned Nighthaunt is more competitive than Legions of Nagash or Grief. Tell me I'm crazy in the comments, I suppose, but anyway, on to the battle line. Nighthaunt have 4 battle line options available: Chain Rasps, Spirit Hosts, Hex Raves, and Grimgas Reapers. Like SCE, we'll tackle them from cheapest to most expensive, starting with the cute little Chain Rasps. Chain Rasp Horde, 80 for 10, with an impressive 50% massive regiment for that last bit. That puts 40 at 280, not bad. 25 mil bases with 2 attacks per model at 4s and 4s for rolling 1s to wound is not the worst damage for their cost. I know people's Clouds of Battle line come in many different patterns and shapes depending on what you're doing, but roughly speaking you can expect like 4 to 11 damage per combat versus armor 4, depending on how many you get in. Ethereal is nice, but everyone in the army has it, so I'm going to be spending less time on it each time, except here to point out that since their save is a 5-up, it kind of sucks, Ethereal or not. So they're going to die. But they're not going to die outright, and your opponent's going to be wasting points on Rend 1 and 2, which is a nice little baked-in bonus. Also, flying 6-inch move is actually quite nice for cheap battle line, I do say. Don't be concerned by the 6 bravery you see on the War Scroll if the unit includes a champion, which it always does. It's bravery 10, so don't worry about it. Overall, B+ battle line unit. They work well in 10s, unlike skeletons, whose attacks are only decent due to big unit sizes and bonuses from those. And they work well in 40s too. Taking 3 minimum units can be good for elite points elsewhere, and unfurling a bluish-white carpet of 120 can really turn a battlefield into an LA traffic jam. I mean, if you're the kind of person who likes moving around hundreds of little guys. For me, I play Beastclaw, so 20 is pushing it, but, you know, to each his own. Next up we have Spirit Hosts, your, I guess, glass cannon battle line, or specialized glass cannon because they only do mortal wounds in a way. 3 for 120, and no massive regiments, so 12 for 480, but you would never do that because that is a lot of 50mm bases. You're probably going to run these in 6s. 6-inch flying move and a 4-up ethereal save, now we're talking, with 3 wounds per model, making them 9 wounds for 120. Not bad. An impressive 6 attacks per model, with natural 6s proccing a mortal wound, but their normal hit and wound values are truly awful, 5s and 4s, so really you're crit fishing and everything else is a miss. As far as the math goes, you can expect about 1 to 5 mortal wounds per 3 models attacking, plus an extra 1 normal damage versus armor 4, maybe. This is actually not bad for 120 points that satisfies battle line. Next up we have Hex Wraiths. Fresh off the treadmill from their 20-point drop, this really does change the game. They are now the Gore Grunta of Nighthaunt. 140 points for 5, but no massive regiment, so 560 for 20. Which is a lot, but you do get a lot. 12-inch flying move is exceptional for battle line. 4-up ethereal save and 2 wounds per model, so they are fast flying anvils. They're hard to deal with. Like their Gore Grunta counterparts, they are a bit pillow-fisted, and unlike their Gore Grunta counterparts, you don't have 7 WAs to use to make them truly scary at fighting. The best you can do is double pile them in sometimes, and even then their damage is like good-ish. Although they do sprinkle a few mortal wounds per combat, which is nice. And I do mean a few. Their Spectral Hunter's ability lets you roll 1 dice per Hexwraith model in the movement phase that passes across an enemy to do 1 mortal wound per 5-up, which, I mean, honestly is not great, but it is something. You get maybe a D3 mortal wounds total if every one of the 10 models pass across something, though it doesn't work on piling in, so don't get too excited, but at least you do some damage on retreats, which isn't bad. And these guys are about area denial and tar pits, so you know, retreating every other turn is not the worst strategy. Finally, we have Grimghast Reapers, the battle line option that was good in Nighthaunt and arguably too good in someone else's army, though we've obviously seen since December that they're completely fine in both armies. They're not even remotely a problem in this day and age. But they got nerfed anyway, so whatever. Unfortunately, GW decided on the laziest and worst way of fixing this non-problem by making them go up 20 per 10 for both armies, even the army they weren't a problem in. What this means is Grimghast Reapers in Legions of Nagash get to join Nagash himself on the shelf. In Nighthaunt, it just means that Grimghast Reapers are worse than Bladegeist Revenants, and so probably not worth playing. But it's not as bad as in LON. Sorry Nighthaunt players, you were punished for doing nothing wrong. So what do we make of all these battle line choices? Honestly, they're all good, man. Like, you get some good options here. I'm pleased with Nighthaunt battle line choices. This isn't going to be a lecture about missed opportunities and poor rules writing, like Stormcast was. Chain Rasps have some decent battalions to pick from. They're good in small units, they're good in big units. Spirit Hosts are fun. In fact, I kind of like a unit of 6 as like a mortal wound hand grenade in a list that doesn't mind the extra drop and is looking for a little more fun. Although Spirit Hosts don't benefit very well from your bonus attack CAs, as an extra 1 attack per model with only 3 or 6 of them is basically like a waste. You're just fishing for 6s after all. They don't do anything else. Getting a 10 up to charge on them is so huge, and degenerate gamblers might be tempted with thoughts of 72 attacks off a double pile-in, or mercenarying in a Necromancer and a Corpse Guard to dance them because they're summonable, and then rolling that 10 up for 3 pile-ins and 108 attacks, spewing out like 20 mortal wounds from your 240 point unit of 6. I mean, it sounds pretty good, man, but it is a casino. But then again, Nighthaunt is undead casino destruction cosplaying as Brandelein's death, so maybe you just lean into it. 140 point Hex Wraiths gives Nighthaunt a new role for its army lists. Fast flying anvil, I love them. You can go big for 40 wounds worth of ethereal deep striking cavalry that tar pit really well, retreat for mortal wounds to reposition and lock people in, and 12-inch flying really gets them where they need to go even after the deep strike or on total commitment, which will happen. If not running a Chain Rasp battalion, I'd often consider min units of these guys to satisfy some battle line slots. In some of my lists, all of them. 555 plus everything else being huge clouds of elite and the best heroes, like, it doesn't sound that bad. Grimghasts, unfortunately, are just worse than Bladegeist Revenants now, as striker units in Nighthaunt. And the fact that Bladegeist Revenants don't count for battle line isn't quite enough to make up for it. Bladegeists have better attacks, still summonable, not Gimp versus Elites, look cooler, and retreat and charge is very synergistic with Wave of Terror. It means you're retreating and charging every turn to fish for those 10 ups for double pylons, and if you're a truly degenerate gambler, you're spending command points to re-roll those charges even if they were successful but not a 10. Depends on how much you like slot machines. So there it is, Night Haunt Battle Line. You actually have pretty decent options covering most types of players and lists. I don't know if there's bad choices one way or another. It really just depends on what strategy and what theme and what playstyle you like when you're building your army. There isn't really a terrible choice. Even Grimghast Reapers. Like, a block of 30 Grimghasts isn't the worst, it's just too expensive, and there's better stuff available. If you already have 30, play them, to be honest. But if you're new to Night Haunt, or you wisely held off buying Grimghasts amid the hysterical complaints 6 months ago, get yourself 40 Bladegeists. Erda Wanderer would like a rundown on the biggest failures of the Seraphon War Scrolls. Yikes, how long are we going to be here? He says they have some solid units, but he's having trouble explaining to the people he's playing with why 2/3 of his army is unplayable. Well, I find that hard to believe that they find that hard to believe. I assume the people you play with have heard of Stormcast. They should be very familiar with 2/3 of an army being unplayable. Just kidding, it's more than 2/3. Anyway, it's no secret that Seraphon's Battle Tome is as ancient as the Slann. And it's the old book in the most desperate need of a new one after probably Beastclaw, which we know is Maw Tribes. You can go through almost every war scroll and point out problems and missed opportunities with Seraphon for, an hour. But to keep it quick, and obviously stuff will change with the new battle plan, as Seraphon was one of the first books in all of AOS, so the game has gotten a lot more interesting since then, and the rules have gotten a lot better, as much as we complain about always strikes first. Keep in mind there weren't even Allegiance abilities when these rules were written, much less spell lores, terrain, etc. But I'm gonna just focus on some of the war scrolls that really stand out to me, in a bad way, not just competitively, but in the game and faction conceptually. Where else to start but with the coolest looking models for any person approaching Seraphon? Besides Engine of the Gods, it's the Carnosaurs. And the breaking of a sacred HeyWoah rule of war scroll writing. The best looking models don't have to be OP or auto-includes or anything, but they should never be trash. Now, Idnet Deepkin, I want you to pay attention here, because this concerns you as well. I'm afraid you're the worst offender in the entire game. I'm gonna need you to get to work on the Turtle, both Eidolons, Lotan, and Soul Render. It's embarrassing that the dumbest looking 2 units are the only things worth playing in your entire faction. Anyway, get that on my desk Monday morning, back to Seraphon. We'll start with the Troglodyte. Here's a picture of this 12-wound monster. The fact that this 12-wound monster ridden by a Mad Max skink only costs 140 points and still is bad should tell you most of what you need to know about this War Scroll situation. Race to the bottom personified. This guy needs to be redesigned from the ground up for the new book, and I hope he is. It's almost like a freak show. Behold his complete lack of rend on every profile. Gaze in wonder at all 3 of his abilities being bad, and recoil in horror at his inability to hold an artifact. Truly exceptional. It doesn't help that the hero versions of this guy aren't good either, and way cheap for what you think they should cost as monsters. Back to that race to the bottom thing, I think Vince has pointed it out on his show a few times, and it's a real issue. Race to the bottom is when something is bad, you just keep reducing its points until it's not good, but grudgingly playable because it's so cheap you'd be a fool not to take it, right? It's a deal so good that you buy this thing you don't even like in great numbers because it's just like the Sam's Club of list building, right? And when you look at a big monster, it should be good, like it's way preferable for Troglodon or Cygor or Stonehorn Beast Riders to cost 360 each and be worth 360, like really pushing it. Feel like you're getting 360 worth of power. In a world, in a world of Grizzlgore Generals and Velazidas and Marathis and Keepers of Secrets, like you're paying 360 for these guys and feeling like you're really getting your money's worth, right? That is much preferable to Cygor just costing 90, so that you kind of have to take him even though he sucks at what he does. But if you're not going to change War Scrolls because you got gun-shy with it after Thunderers, no pun intended, then you really have 2 options. A race to the bottom, or things just being bad and never used forever. And both of those are not great. A race to the bottom isn't good, and something always sucking forever isn't good. I guess I would choose race to the bottom over those two eventualities, but it's much better to just release a better war scroll. Like an official, sorry we fucked up, here's the real Lotan, you know? Oh, a man can dream. I mean, when they were redoing the Sylvaneth book, they had every opportunity to make Alarielle into the god of life that she deserves to be, and said, nah, we'll just make her a little worse and then up her cost by 60. What? Anyway, if you're not going to change War Scrolls during content passes, and you're not going to change War Scrolls in GHBs, at least fucking do it when the book is coming out. Christ. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Kroxigor. Moving on, these guys are your melee heavy hitter big guys. Now, if anyone remembers me complaining about Stormcast Paladins, you might think that I just don't like, categorically, elite melee bruiser types, but that's not technically correct. I don't like slow melee bruiser types. And Games Workshop has pretty historically written their War Scrolls to be bad. They historically give elite units way too few attacks and not enough defense to account for the downside of being elite. But here we have elite melee bruisers that aren't slow. They got an 8-inch move, and it's an army with 2 teleports a turn. You have my attention. These guys are 150 points for 3, so they should be stellar. 4-up save is not exactly great for what you're paying on elite guys like this. 12 wounds for 150 is okay-ish. As far as their attacks are concerned, these guys fight like ogres. That is to say, disappointingly inaccurate. 4s to hit really kills it for me. Lack of rend on their mauls is too bad. One of them gets a Moonhammer though, and he has sort of a decimator attack profile where you're attacking every model within range, which is kind of nice against hordes. And then you have Jaws like a steel trap, which is a really standout example of terrible rules writing. Get a load of this ridiculous 200-word essay of an ability. If the wound roll for an attack made with a model's vice-like jaws, wound roll, so you're already rolling to hit, right? And then in the wound roll, and since they're hitting on 4s, this means that 1 in every 12 attacks will proc Jaws like a steel trap, but let's continue. If the wound roll for an attack made with a model's vice-like jaws is 6 or higher, the Kroxigor clamps its massive teeth around the victim and shakes it back and forth. Both you and your opponent roll a dice. Ugh, Jesus. If you score higher, your opponent does not make a save roll. Instead, the target suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to the difference between the 2 dice rolls. Otherwise, the victim slips free and the attack causes no damage. So half the time your 1 in 12 attacks ability works, it doesn't work. What? I have no idea why Vice-like Jaws isn't just a Star Soul Mace. Like, it's 150 for 3 of these guys. Each one should just, like, if they're going to have Vice-like Jaws at all, it should just be 1 attack, hits on a 3, does a d3 mortal wounds, get on with your fucking life. Why are we wasting this much time? What an annoying paragraph. Imagine a world where Kroxigor are your elite melee fixers. Like, if there's a problem, they can solve it, generally. Kind of like the Marty Thralls, where they're good against big guys and they're good against small guys. You have 3 Kroxigors, they have 4 wounds each, immune to rend 1 because of their scaly armor, right? Which they currently don't have. Jaws like a steel trap is 1 attack per model, it works like a Star Soul Mace. And Sweeping Blows works like the Decimator thing. And there you go. Like, how hard was that? Bastiladon are only good in the battalion because their hit rolls are shit. Pterodon Riders, I don't know. I mean, we're getting to subjective artistic opinions territory here. But I think Pterodon Riders and Ripperdactyls are in top 5 stupidest idea for a model and model in Age of Sigmar. Dumb-looking Flappy Birds that are literally just dropping rocks on people is so stupid. I can't... Who thinks this is cool? I guess Seraphon players think this is cool. I'm sorry. Some people must like this. Clearly, it's definitely not for me. So in between Skinks and Kroxigors, we have a bunch of different Saurus stuff. We got Saurus Warriors, we got Saurus Knights, and Saurus Guard. All 3 of the Saurus types just feel too fragile. They just die in droves. Skinks are for dying in droves. I feel like Saurus should be a little beefier somehow. I'm not saying 2 wounds a model or anything like that, although that has been floated around. I just think their armor should be better. A lot of people seem to think Saurus Warriors or Saurus Guard should have 2 wounds. I just don't see it. I'm looking at these models, and to me, I'm looking at much better armor. I'm not looking at 2 wounds. You know, two wounds are Stormcast or Blood Warriors because of God magic. I mean, you have Saurus Knights with no rend and a bad save that aren't very fast and only do okay damage on 6s to wound. And Saurus Warriors and Saurus Guard, I mean, they might not be very fast, and they might not be very durable, and they might not have very good attacks, and they might not have very good special abilities. I mean, to be perfectly honest, Seraphon Book is one of the new battle tomes that I'm most excited to see, because the game has progressed so much since this book came out. I really can't wait for a fresh look at really awesome lore and concepts, right? You have dinosaurs riding dinosaurs led by immortal Lich Constellation Masters. The game rules they should have should be so interesting. Like, I can't wait. And the lore as well. I'm really looking forward to them doing something with Seraphon. That's cool. So I went to Midwest Meltdown a few weeks ago. We got 115 people, which is pretty good. It was awesome. So far, every Midwest tournament I've been to has been just the right type of chill, friendly, and hobby-focused. Led by Domus, who is somewhat of the darling of Midwest TOs. And like most Age of Sigmar tournaments, it's really just an excuse to play 5 games of AOS, take pictures of cool armies, and be surrounded by people that you can talk to the game about, and have them give a shit. There were hard lists and soft lists, and a lot of fun wandering monsters people tooled up. Oh yeah, the first 3 rounds took place in Gur. And yes, Domus used the Wandering Monsters rule every time. When you signed up, you agreed to bring a monster in addition to your 2K list, and all the beasts would use the same war scroll that Domus made up to keep things even. And it worked out pretty well. It was pretty cool. When people first read the Gur Realmscape rule, it was immediately dismissed as a barrier to entry for tournaments, and you can't expect players to have an extra monster lying around. Well, when it comes to Age of Sigmar, it seems that you really can. Several players brought extras, and many people borrowed some, but if there's anything the average AOS player has on a shelf somewhere, it's an extra big monster with lax base size limitations. Some of the monsters were extremely cool, including somebody who tooled up an Ale Guzzler Gargant to look like Domus, with his same glasses and same male pattern baldness, holding some dice and a ruler, which was awesome. There was a dead ringer for the Monty Python monster, which was so sweet. Yeah, just all around great looking monsters. I also really like what he did with secondaries, which is a system I've never really been happy with the implementation of since they were introduced. The stock standard GW ones are way too win more for me, and they're boring. Domus made the first 3 round secondaries be secret choices between 3 different options. Either your monster dies, or their monster dies, or yours lives. And all 3 rounds, basically everyone chose their monster dies, and then got it killed somehow. Was this trivially easy to get every round? Yes. But if I must suffer secondaries, I'm the happiest when they are nearly auto-completed, and feature cool stuff happening. Naturally, I brought Beastclaw Raiders, both because I vowed to take my time with IDK, and I am, and my big swaths of free time are spent making videos instead of painting, and because I ain't no fair-weather ogre player. Though there's nothing wrong with playing strong armies, of course. There really isn't. I guess I'm once again talking to Facebook here, but if you bring a funsies list to a tournament and get sour at someone else trying to get first place, I mean, you chose the funsies list. Come round 3, Swiss pairings will sort you out into the fun bracket of like-minded players, and everything will be fine. The type of guys that go to the lobby bar during their opponent's movement phase. Nah, I trust you, dude. You like stouts? Now that's a tournament. Mid to bottom tables is a fun place to be honest, and this couldn't be more different than MTG, where after your second loss, you actually drop from the event and pout for the rest of the weekend. But you don't want to just get smashed, right? Well, like when you're building a commander deck, sometimes you start with design restrictions. Like, this creature has to be the commander, or I can only use cards printed in the Lorwyn block, or every creature has to be an elemental, or every card has to have the same artist, or every spell has to help everyone and not just you, or the 99 can only contain commons and uncommons, etc. Once your basic rules are in place, you min-max and hyper-tune the shit out of it. This allows people who are real Spike Johnny deck builders to get that type of fun out of it without their creation irradiating any possibility of their opponents having fun, in theory. Also, that type of player certainly chafes at the idea of net decking the best list. After all, that skips the fun part. In Age of Sigmar, deciding on a faction is often a design restriction, especially if yours isn't one of the S tier or even close to it. Others could be building around a battalion everyone thinks is bad, or only skeleton models, or I know Grots are better but I want to play Dragaths, or Magic Heavy Stormcast, or whatever. After squeezing every drop of optimum juice out of your theme, playing the game then becomes how many wins can your Nito list steal? The absolute state of Beastclaw players. I mean, hey, lots of people do this. I mean, I'm jumping ahead here, but I just got to get it out. Andrew Tolstead brought his Rustfoot's Iron Moon Boys, complete with actual casting of his real foot that he that he made a cast out of and then painted. And that thing won coolest looking army. Well deserved, very well done. We were really happy for him. And he finally got some recognition for it. That thing is gorgeous. And very well painted in real life. He's made a conscious effort to improve his painting. And I really wish I would have as well, instead of just rushing to complete stuff for the next event over and over. Which means that in my 2.5 years of painting, I have become a little better at brush control and a little better at doing things poorly but fast, and I regret it. Which is why we're doing this IDK stuff slow, and I'm making videos telling people to, don't just rush completion non-stop to the next event. That's my advice. Anyway, Midwest Meltdown Beastclaw Raiders. Design restriction. Have to play Beastclaw Raiders. Also, I wanted to take Mournfang out for a spin. I understand they're bad. I'm one of the people who keep saying they're bad. And their points went down, and I said they didn't go down enough. But I think Mournfang look really cool, and I happen to own a bunch of them. And a bunch of people have been messaging me about how I'm overreacting on Mournfang, and they're actually much better than I think they are. And this points reduction makes them good. And I'm like, you know what? Fine. They look cool. I'll take a battalion, so hopefully I outdrop everyone, and we'll see what they're made of. So I took a Eurobad, which is the battalion that makes your Huskard on Stonehorn do big boy damage. It adds +1 damage on all of his weapons, which, since it's a battalion ability and not an artifact and not a command trait, this affects the mount as well. So his Stonehorn's doing 4 damage a hit, and his Crushing Hooves are doing a D3 +1, etc. So when you math it out, he does about as much damage as a Frostlord on average, even though he doesn't have the Frost Spear, which is pretty impressive. Now he's much more fragile because he only has a 4-up save and 1 less wound, but, I'm just trying it out here. Eurobad also allows your 6s to wound to proc 1 mortal wound in addition to their normal damage, but I never considered this very good because 6s to wound, as I said before in this video and, in videos before, when you're hitting on 4s, 6s to wound doing something is once every 12 attacks, which is like never, especially when your average model has like 6 attacks, So, yeah, every once in a while it'll do something, but I'm not really banking on it. It's about Huskard being playable and figuring out some way to make Mournfangs decent by putting them in a battalion and keeping your drops down so that you can get those double turns all the time. Because the only way you're going to win is by grabbing double turns from people, pretty much. And so going low drops becomes a real strategy. I took a Frostlord on Stonehorn, of course, because you have to. Made him the General, gave him Everwinter's Master, gave him Ethereal, so now he's on a 3-up Ethereal save, which is actually good. He's an actually good unit. 2 units of 4 Mournfang with the Gargant Hackers, because 2s don't quite do enough. You really want 4 of them to get in there. It's just, they just don't have enough attacks per model for 2 of them to do anything. They only have 2 attacks per model that are good, remember. And everything they do hits on 4s, even their mounts. Took a Stonehorn Beast Riders as well, with the Vulture of course, and the Harpoon Gun, although you rarely use it because you're always running. I had a few options about where to go from here with the list, and I inevitably chose 2 units of 3 Yetis, and I know this kind of ruins our drops, although not really, because 4 drops is actually pretty low still. But just because Yetis are so integral to Beastclaw, doing well, because they're the best thing in the whole army next to the Frostlord, that I just didn't. Maybe I'm too used to playing Yetis, but I just didn't feel safe not playing any. I felt like I needed guys to hang back sometimes and hold on points, and I needed people to squiggle around and just kind of annoy people and mess people up and have bodies on the table somehow, so I went with it. And yeah, you'll note that there are no wizards here. I didn't ally in fungoid shamans. Like the most competitive beast claw list I can summon is this one. It's got 2 fungoid cave shamans, it's got the arachna cauldron, it has a whole bunch of min units of yetis for the maximum amount of annoyance and pile-in tricks and making sure you don't lose too much per activation and all this other stuff. But I wanted to try out Mournfang, so I went with this one instead. So this isn't going to be like a major tournament report, I'll just give you the highlights. My first round opponent was on a really strong Tyrants of Blood Khorne list. His list was really quite good, and I thought I was really in for it. For some reason, every tournament, I think, let's see, Adepticon I played Khorne round 1, Dragonfall I played Khorne round 1, Wapaka I played Khorne round 1. I would need to go back and check, but I think I'm on a streak of playing Khorne round 1 at almost every tournament I've ever entered, which is just weird. But it's a popular army, so who knows. He had Halo of Blood on the General Bloodthirster, which means he attacks at the beginning of combat. Super good against me, right? And due to Tyrants of Blood, once one Bloodthirster is done attacking, another one can attack immediately after. And then once that one is done, another one can attack immediately after until you're out of Bloodthirsters in the battalion. And so since you have Halo of Blood on one of them, they all get to fight at beginning of combat, which is super strong. And the rest of his list was pretty good as well, so I'm like, alright, I'm in for it, you know. But as it happens, he was just a really good list builder, and hadn't played the army even once yet. In Magic, it's almost a meme at this point, that when you sit down across from someone at a tournament, you're like, hey, so how long you been playing Magic? And they're like, this is my first tournament, I just borrowed a deck, you know? And people said that seriously, trying to be tricky, to throw you off and have you underestimate them or something. Like years and years ago, people would actually try to trick you by saying that. But so many people tried to say that so long that everyone's just like, yeah, whatever, buddy. And now it has become somewhat of a meme where you say that and you both just have a good laugh, you know? Where you're like, oh yeah, I just borrowed this deck, you know, whatever. And then drop down Arabian Nights, City of Brass into Dark Ritual Thoughtseize, you win, you know? Like, but this guy was telling the truth. So I had a cool game where, like, we were kind of just looking up his rules as it was happening. And I don't know if I told him about it or it was more of a like leading to a discovery, but it's like, okay, so you attack first with this one, and then that one gets to go, and then that one gets to go. Like, it's really quite good. And he's like, oh, cool. And, you know, he would like do something, and then we'd resolve it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, next time, you know, you could pile in from 6 here, so you can actually retreat and then do this. And so we're basically like throughout the game, like, we're playing a game, but it's kind of like halfway a teaching game in a way, because I like entered into a little bit of like teaching the game mode with him. And at first I didn't know if he was like insulted that I was doing that, but actually he was just really appreciative of it. And in later rounds of the tournament, he came back at least once and he's like, yo, dude, that trick we found out, totally wrecked someone with it, like, and it was actually pretty cool. Like, it was just a good experience. It's really hard for Beastclaw to deal with Bloodthirsters that all strike at the beginning of combat, right? Because we don't have tricks like that. I mean, I suppose you could take a few Thundertusks, but like they're really bad in most other matchups, so they're not really worth it. So how did I solve the problem of the Halo of Blood Bloodthirster? Well, I charged it with 3 Stonehorns and killed it from impact damage during the charge phase, because the mortal wounds happen in the charge phase and not combat. And there you go. Turns out I had 3 hammers and the problem was a nail, so we got there. In this game, Mournfang were pretty good against Blood Warriors and Blood Reavers and stuff. Like, weak, minimum-sized unit, chaff battle line guys that weren't very good in combat and didn't have, like, all their buffs. Mournfang were pretty good at just kind of crashing into them and doing some damage. So I'm like, oh, okay. This is alright. This is okay. And what it meant was, my round 1 was a victory, and it was a major victory with all the, you know, max everything, including the secondary, because our monsters just killed each other. It was awesome. And so the streak continues, right? Round 1, I play against Khorne, and I get full points, which has happened just about every tournament so far. But what's the problem with that? The problem with that is then next round, because of Swiss pairings, I get paired up against an army who deserves to have gotten full points, right? And then I get chopped back down to size. So round 2 is versus Legions of Nagash. He's on Legion of Blood with an Immortal Velazada and like 100 bodies. I think 60 of them were zombies and 40 of them were skeletons, with a few other units sprinkled through to taste. And the cool thing about his army was it was a full concept army, and not a concept army like apparently what the official concept army is that GW says, where it's like, my concept is I prime my models and do nothing else to them and call them stone, you know. Like, this was a concept army where every undead model in his whole army was a Bretonnian figure that he painted and converted into being a zombie or a skeleton, or the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, or the Necromancer. Like, it was really quite awesome. He had 5 Blood Knights, which are scary on the charge, those guys. And due to their recent points drop, they're like remotely playable, even though they don't have the summonable keyword, which is kind of like your whole strength in the army. They're still like the good strikers on the charge. Like, they do great damage. It's just if they don't charge, their damage actually sucks, so you have to watch out for it. I think I was looking over his list and I'm like, oh, okay, so no this or no that. And he's like, yeah, it would be nice to have this or that, but there just aren't any Bretonnian models that could reasonably be converted to look like those. And I'm like, oh, we have a fellow design restricted, a fellow design restriction player here. Perfect, well, let's go. So I outdropped him because LON, unless you're on Death March, pretty much doesn't have any playable battalions, so their drops are really high. That's one of their weaknesses, in other words. So I outdropped him, and I split my forces left and right to try to pincer him, because a downside with LON is that it's hard for them to project power in more than one place at once, because so many of their heroes kind of have to hover around or cover their big, blobs of guys, and you kind of know where they want to go because of grave sites and things like that, so there's a little bit of telegraphing going on. So my goal was to pin him as close to his half of the table as I could, and kind of hold there while scooping up points. And if I ever win a priority roll to go twice, I will have scored enough points to probably take the game. So I feed the Vampire Lord some Mournfang just to waste his time, and then pin the big units with Frost Lords that just run across the table and kill a bunch of them. I get the game to a position where if I win turn 2 priority, I think I can actually win the game, but I don't, which is fine, because I get the game to a point in turn 3 where he's starting to, the zombie horde is starting to become a little too much. But if I win turn 3 priority, I win the game, but I fail the priority again. Damn. And by turn 4, it's too late, and I get a major loss and lose everything. So that's too bad. Normally, Beastclaw Raiders has no chance at all against Legions of Nagash, even weaker nerfed Legions of Nagash. But the battle plan kind of favored me, and he was on a design restriction list. So I really had a chance there twice for 2 priorities, but didn't happen, so oh well. Major win and a major loss. Now we're back to where we belong, but you know what? Batting 50-50 is still better than the average win for BCR, so I'm feeling pretty good. Round 3 is Khorne again, and I was a little bummed out because I've played a lot of Khorne, and I just want to play against new armies that I've never played against before, because that's fun. But I'll take Khorne, alright. No Tyrants of Blood, nothing like that. Mostly mortals. And Slaughter Priests are really good. Round 3, there was definitely blood for the Blood God. I got unreasonably lucky every single stage of this game. Like, it was completely not fair. Nothing that happened was fair for my opponent, which is a shame for him, but it was spectacular for me. So this round's realm feature, because we're in Gur again, was Primal Violence, which means at the end of combat, you roll a die, and on a 6, you repeat the whole combat phase again, which means anyone who charged gets to pile in, it's you go, I go, fight again. Very dangerous, probably not going to happen, but that could be massive, right? Well, I outdropped him and let him go first, and he looked me in the eye and he's like, you know what, I'm coming up. So here we go. And so he moves all his guys up into charge range because he moves halfway up the table. And I'm like, all right, let's go. So my whole army charges his whole army and does a bunch of damage. And then I win the double turn. And I charge like the next huge part of his army remaining guys. and do a whole bunch of damage. And then at the end of that combat, we roll the die, and it's a 6. So we repeat the whole combat, and enough of my guys are within pile-in distance and reach of enough of his guys that everybody still gets to fight again, even though they wiped out people last round. And he has like 2 models left on the entire table, you know, at the end of the top of 2. I basically took 3 turns in a row and tabled him on turn 2. This must be what armies that are strong feel like. And I was just thinking, man, that was so unbelievably not fair, you know, but hilarious. He was having a blast. Like, he took it well. We were having, you know, we were laughing about it. He just wanted to see awesome stuff happen. He wasn't salty at all. It was good, you know, good on him. And I just thought to myself, like, man, like, it's so not fair that I was able to basically pile in and attack twice. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, dude, lots of armies can pile in and attack twice, just whenever they fucking want. Oh. But anyway, major victory, completely smashed him. If it was a normal game, he probably would have won, because his list was pretty good. But it's Age of Sigmar, and priority exists. So, you know, sometimes nothing matters. It's just like you roll this one die, and then your opponent's fucking completely blasted. So, Day 2, round 4, and I'm on 2-1 with 2 major victories as Beast Claw. So I'm like, well, you know, it's going to be 2 losses from here, but I got my fun in, right? And unfortunately, I end up playing against a teammate. Womp womp. It was Christian Ware and I, and we were both on the same team. And we're both on 2-1 with 2 major victories. And we're like, oh man, this is going to have to be a team kill. That's too bad, you know, because you want the most people from your team to individually do well. And when you play against someone from your team, well, somebody's got to lose, right? I know he's on Fire Slayers. I know he's on Lords of the Lodge. I know it's Duality of Death. I couldn't be more screwed. Like, we're just like, well, you know, here, it was a good run, boys, right? And, you know, if anyone's played with Christian Ware, great attitude guy, you know, we were joking about it and laughing the whole way through. He had a good tweet about it as well. And Duality of Death is special because Duality of Death has been changed so that now Battle Line can capture, which means Hearthguard Berserkers can capture, which means I'm really screwed. And I can't allow him to go first. If I let him go first, he's going to appear on one objective with 30 Hearthguard, and my whole army attacking 5 turns in a row cannot kill Hearthguard. They just can't. Mathematically speaking, they won't. Which means one objective is just lost for the whole game, and then the rest of his whole army can go after the second one. So basically, I can't let him go first. So I outdrop him because I'm on a battalion, and I have to take the first turn, which is a shame because I don't want to get charged by him, because one of the secrets of Fire Slayers is that, yes, they're the most defensive units in the game, but they're little Spartans as well. Like, they do great damage. They're not Plague Bearers, right, that are really defensive but do 0 damage. They're the best of both worlds. Like, they do great damage, and they're invincible. This round we choose normal secondaries, and so the secondary that I choose in secret is have a unit on each quadrant of the battlefield, and my opponent doesn't. So I choose that one because I know I'm going to take first turn, and I know I'm going to take both objectives first turn. And I'll be in the 4 quadrants at the end of my turn, and so I'll score my secondary immediately, and have both objectives, and I'll make, like, electron rings of chaff around my guys, so that he has to slowly, like, attack through them to finally kill me. And we'll see if he has enough damage to basically kill everything in my whole army before I score enough points so that he can't quite get there. And if I ever lose a priority roll, I lose the game. And if he does too much damage, I lose the game. And so those are the two things to be tracking, you know, during this game. So he starts his first turn. On the left objective, he charges me with a Magmadroth and some Volkite Berserkers. And on the right objective, he tunnels up his Hearthguard Berserkers, who need to make a 9-inch charge. Definitely needs to fail that 9-inch charge for me to be feeling good here. He does not fail it. Doesn't even need to reroll it. Kills all my chaff and puts the capturing Stonehorn Beast Riders down to 1 life. So on the left, he charges his Magmadroth into my Huskard and kills him from full. Just fucking drops him. The 3 Yetis I have on the right objective for Chaff, they're dead. Roll for initiative, and initiative follows a proper order, so I get to go. Turn 2, I have 4 Mournfang on the left objective, but not controlled because he has 10 Volkite Berserkers on it. And a triple Chaff screen on the right objective of 3 Yetis, then 3 inches, then 4 Mournfang, then 3 inches, then Frostlord on Stonehorn. Because I retreat the Beast Riders away, and hence lose the point, and then move Frostlord onto it. So this allows me to keep it with a dude who isn't like almost dead, although it does interrupt the successive chain of like gaining extra objective points, but I think it's worth it. So I do that. And, you know, here we go. We got to hold the baby, right? We got to hold baby. And I don't charge anything because it'll just hasten my death, and so I wait. On the left, he rolls a charge with the Hearthguard Berserkers and gets an 11, like a massive charge. And I'm like, oh, fuck, now he can get around all my chaff. So he fully envelops the first 2 lines of chaff, and in his first attack, he kills all 4 Mournfang and all 3 Yetis full to dead, and then piles in a second time and tags the Frostlord, and while he doesn't get to attack the Frostlord with many models, he still managed to put like 5 damage on it. And on the left flank, the 4 Mournfang that I had on the point were killed completely by the Volkite Berserkers. And he has controlled the left point now for 2 turns, and I've controlled this one for 1 and then 1. So he's ahead on points. So it's the bottom of 2, and I have 1 model alive, and it's the Frostlord, who has about 7 life left. And everything else is dead. I have killed a total of 3 Fireslayer models, and he's up on points. So, you know, there's nothing I can do at all, and we roll for priority, and he wins just for fun. And he's like, I think I give it to you, mate. I basically ran up to all the points and put my entire army as chaff in front of me, and he just easily killed it in a single turn. So, I mean, fair enough. What I did to the Khorne player, he did to me. Except, he didn't get a double turn, and he didn't get a double combat phase. It's just, Fireslayers are good. Like, what can I say? And nothing I have in Beastclaw can even come close to doing anything against Fireslayers. You just don't have the tools. There's nothing you can do. And we had a good laugh about it. And so I'm like, alright. 2 major wins, 2 major losses. Can I steal one last victory and make it a winning record with Beastclaw Raiders? Age of Sigmar gods, I'm gonna need a softball. I'm gonna need like an underhand softball pitch here. Give me something good for the round 5 matchup. And it's Skaven. Fuck. Okay. That was not an underhanded pitch. However, good guy opponent was on a design restriction list as well. He said, when I was looking over his list, that he, quote, doesn't want people to hate him for what army he plays. And so he purposefully doesn't play any Pestilence models, and he doesn't play Rat Trap, and he doesn't play Warp Lightning cannons. Because he's like, these are the 3 things everyone hates about Skaven, and so I'm not playing any of them. Because I want my opponent to like me in real life. And I'm like, you know, fair enough, man, but I think it would be a little childish to, like, actually think someone's a jerk for what list they're playing as long as it's legal. I think a rules writer is a jerk if he writes something so unfun that people hate people for playing it, but that's, you know, something else entirely. If something is so toxic that you hate someone for playing it, I feel like they should ban it, you know what I mean? Like, don't pass the buck off to the players to police that kind of thing. Don't burden them with it, right? So, okay, he's avoiding 3 of the, like, most annoying things in Skaven, but his list is no pushover. It's got a bunch of Jezzails. It's got a bunch of good stuff. You know, it's got a Vermin Lord. And so right out the gate, my opponent made a mistake with Gnawhole placement. He put 1 Gnawhole on his side and 2 on my side, on my back board edge, close to both of the objectives on my side. It allowed me to deploy both of my units of 3 Yetis close enough to the Gnawholes to body block any teleports, but still within range to capture and control the objectives. And so I got to hold those 6 Yetis, 3 over here, 3 over here, on points, just scoring me points the entire game, and then throw a bunch of sacrificial Mournfang at his Vermin Lord, who would kill, like, all 4 of them every round. Like, I'd send 4 up, he'd kill all 4. I send 4 up, he killed 3, and then on his turn would finish 1 off. Like, it was just wasting his time. Sending Frost Lords into his Jezzails and stuff like that. And I was able to basically send enough stuff after him and position and kill most of his massive regiments. I was just mainly trying to keep him on his side of the table for the most part. I was able to do that for long enough to win a major victory on points. And it was long, it was difficult, and it required my opponent to make an error in deployment, but we got there. And against Skaven, no less. Overall, a good showing for Beastclaw Raiders, even though we got, we got very lucky to do it. But that's what it means to be in a tier as low as mine, right? You build a list, and you have good plans, and you have good strategies, and you play very well, and you need to get very lucky with every matchup, which I did except Fire Slayers. And you need to get very lucky with what's happening in the matchups, and your opponents need to make huge mistakes, or get very unlucky, or both. And then you can go 3-2, and just feel like $1,000,000. So we got there. I look forward to Maw Tribes. I look forward to what kind of broken ass shit I'll be able to do with a normal, with, like, you know, big boy army, right? Like a real book army. I'm looking forward to it. Real quick props and slops. Props. Yetis greatly helped me win 2 games, especially versus Skaven, and had it been a unit of 6 instead of 2 units of 3, I would not have won that game. Frostlord with Ithuriel, being the only truly good unit in the entire faction, still true, pulled his weight every single game, and didn't die in 1 hit, and didn't die in 1 combat to Hearthguard Berserkers. It took 2, so got him, right? Being only 4-drop directly helped me win every game that I won, and gave me a chance in the 2 games that I lost. Although the chance for the Fire Slayers one is here or there. But if the Fire Slayers had outdropped me, I would have had 0 chance of winning. So, you know, there it is. Or 0 chance of struggling. I guess I won't call it chance of winning against Fire Slayers. It was chance of struggling. Because I struggled for about 38 minutes before getting tabled on turn 2. Not having wizards did not hurt me at all. In fact, it was a good thing, because I played against a lot of Khorne, and they would have just been completely shut down. And my opponents didn't play any endless spell terrain that would lock me in place, which is the main thing I was concerned about not taking wizards for. But I'm like, you know what, my wizards fucking suck. I don't have an Arachna Cauldron painted up, I just playtest with it. So, you know, I'm taking this other list instead. And it was just a good thing. Also props to Domus for being awesome and running a great tournament. Like, the awards were awesome. There were like 8 or 9 hobby-related awards. And then he was like, alright, so this person's undefeated, here's your trophy. This person's in 2nd place. Best Death, Order, Destruction, and Chaos. There you go. Okay, now that that's taken care of, on to the real awards that people actually care about. All but said that. It was so obvious he was like, only interested in giving out, like, cool hobby awards, and like, so the best monster is this, and the coolest looking monster that everyone voted on is this, and the coolest looking army is this, and the best painted is this, and best sportsmanship and best overall. He was so excited to hand out all the trophies, and he custom built a plaque for the coolest looking army, which he gave to Andrew, which was awesome. And then he's like, yeah, these guys built strong lists and they won, here you go. Like, it was kind of funny. Everyone was a good sport about it though, like, it was pretty good. So those are the props. Also, the hotel was great, had a bar right next door. We could leave all our stuff in the convention room. They just locked it up and then we left, so we didn't have to, like, constantly travel back and forth with our armies, which was awesome. Yeah, just a great time. Slops. Eurobad. The lower drops were really important, but the Mortal Wound proc, 6s to wound for Beastclaw, just does not happen. It just does not happen when you're hitting on 4s. Eurobad Huskguard actually gets a slop as well. On paper, he does good damage, and if you math it out, he's supposed to do about as much damage as a Frostlord on average. But in games, he really just missed a lot. I mean, there's no Frost Spear that hits on 3s to kind of give him some reliable damage every once in a while and protect him against charting. It's just you're attacking with your 6 stone horns that hit on 4s. And so it's like, all right, hitting on 4s. All right, 2 4s, rolling the wound, a 2 and a 3. All right, 1. Make your 1 2-up Ren save. Failed it. There you go. Take 4 damage, and that's it. Like, you're, okay. Every time Eurobad Huskguard attacked, just about, it was a disappointment. Simply a bunch of missing and low overall damage. That's one of those on paper versus on the table sort of things. Or maybe I just got unlucky when I was rolling with him every time. Like, who knows? The one thing I will say, though, is that 4-up save on him is such a liability. He got fucking destroyed anytime anyone attacked him. And Sepulchral Plate was goddamn useless. It's a 6-up shrug, so yeah, it's not going to work a lot, and it sure fucking didn't. Mournfang would charge something, and then miss a lot, and then die. Every time except one. In the first game against Khorne, units of 4 Mournfang were pretty good against 100-odd points of battle line, who suck. But in the other 4 games, Mournfang would charge up, miss a whole bunch, and then just fucking die. And more than that, it would be 3 or 4 of them would die. Like 3 would die, I would fail my battle shock, and then the last one would run away. That's pretty much all that ever happened. These guys are not hammers, because they don't do good damage, and they're not anvils, because they die too easily. And they're slow because they can't run and charge like Stonehorn, and they're too elite because it's only 2 instead of 3 like Gorgrunto or Ishlengard or something. Yeah, they're at 140, that might look good, but they're just fucking not. So I'm sorry to say, Mournfang at 140 still fucking suck. Yetis are just way better. Yetis are just better. If Yetis cost 140, and so did Mournfang, Yetis would still be better. That's how much better Yetis are. So everything in the Eurobad wasn't very good, and ended up just being a time waster to send it up and have it die in a turn or 2. But the low number of drops was really useful, so there is that. Very fun event, would go again, would bring BCR again, because I love BCR. Really hoping we don't drown in the soup in the next tome. I'm hoping we keep our identity, keep our culture, you know? Really hoping the best way to play Beastclaw moving forward when you get our new book is not 40 fucking Noblars, a block of 12 Ogres, a Butcher, a Tyrant, and a single Frostlord, like a single BCR unit. And then the rest Gutbusters. That would be so depressing to me. The second most depressing thing right after playing a bunch of Noblars and basically a Gutbusters list except with 1 Stonehorn added to it, like duct taped on. The second most depressing thing would be if the best way to play pure Beastclaw moving forward is still a whole bunch of Yetis and a whole bunch of Frost Sabers. Because that's currently the best way to play Beastclaw. Just like I wish for everything, right? Like, the coolest looking models should be good. I can only hope that Mournfang and Stonehorns are the best way to play moving forward. So, here's hoping for that Maw Tribes book. I wonder who's writing it. Maybe I should look that up. Special thanks to Bjarni, Carl Martin Rosenberg, Carson Blake Phipps, Chaos Spawn, Charles Faduke, Des Brennan, Doom and Darkness, Dr. Hank, Dwight Crow, Edward Lawrence, Eric, Erda, Wanderer, Greg Dykus from the Sigmar and Son podcast. Thanks a bunch. I'll have to come back on there sometime. Henners, Jacob Graham, Jens Nielsen, Jimmy Starr, Kevin Harcum, Kyle Zmerchik, Marcus, Martin Orlando, aka Good Painter Stormcast Man, Matthew Davies, Michael Derazinski, Miguel Cabezas, Marie Gank, Nosh, Perna, Richard Rossman, Rob Nelson, Sean, Steve Pegg, Vincent Wright, Warbound, and of course Windigo. See you in Classic next week, my dude. Thanks for watching.